In this episode, we're going to be checking out an IP geolocation beta feature using Google Cloud's load balancers. Using this feature, you can use the load balancer to inject user-defined HTTP headers with geolocation data from client requests. Maybe before we dive into the technical aspects of this episode, first let me show you what the end result looks like. Back in episode 56, we deployed this example site using Kubernetes. Then we configured a simple deployment pipeline in episode 58. In this episode, we're going to add a little footer down here that guesses where the user request is coming from based off their IP address. You can see here, it says Oak Bay, which is pretty close to where I live. Also, just a heads up, this is very specific to Google Cloud, but can be reproduced elsewhere using similar technologies. We'll chat about a few of these at the end of the episode. You can totally test this out yourself too by going over to sysadmindemo.com and looking at the footer. Then if you click the debug link here, you can see a full dump of the headers for this HTTP request. So you can see for my request, it thinks I'm coming from Oak Bay, British Columbia, Canada, and that's actually just a few kilometers from my house. Yeah, it's pretty cool. All right, so why did I add this? Well, in an upcoming episode, I wanted to build sort of an example interactive game where you can answer questions and either get them right or wrong. And I wanted to create sort of a leaderboard where we could group all the answers together based off the user's country. But there are a ton of things you can do with this data, so I wanted to walk you through a few of them. Tons of websites will use this type of data behind the scenes without you even knowing. They often log it, say when you enter a support ticket, some user feedback, etc. Lots of times this can help determine if a user from a particular country or region is having a hard time using your site. Maybe you need to translate it for them, or it's super slow in their country. This could act as sort of a signal that you need to add additional infrastructure there. Tons of companies use this type of data for analytics to see if their product is growing in a particular country, or maybe they need to direct marketing efforts there. Lots of people use this for fraud detection too. I suspect this is happening, but a lot of it is happening with machine learning now, where maybe country is just one of the features that they're looking at. Also, when you're playing multiplayer games, tons of companies are using this type of geographic data in their matchmaking service so that, hey, you're actually playing people that are close to you, that are speaking the same language, etc. Also, tons of address lookups. Say you want to look up the closest store on a particular website. Lots of maps are using this type of data behind the scenes to assist your searches. It's kind of crazy to think how common this is, but you actually don't see a lot of people talking about it. All right, so let's walk through how this actually works. By the way, in episode 56 and 58, we walked through this architecture in detail. So we have a user up here making a connection that passes through our load balancer using their IP address, and this gets passed to our web server. Typically, for requests that flow through the load balancer, you'll see some type of X forwarded for header that contains the original user's IP address. But we can ask the load balancer to look up the user's IP geolocation data and inject additional headers into this request. The additional headers will then be passed to our web server where we can do things with them. In a nutshell, that's basically how the website sysadmindemo.com actually works. So let's set this up. There's this new beta feature called user-defined request headers where we can ask the load balancer to inject these custom headers as requests are passing through it. Here's sort of a good example of a before and after. So we have this X-client geolocation header where we're asking for the country and the city. And then here's an example of what the output might look like, where the country is US and the city is Mountain View. Then here's this table that shows all the available keywords we can use. So we can add things like the estimated round trip time, client country, the state or province, the city Latin long, and then we have a bunch of TLS metadata that we can add in too. So this is the demo website again where we were testing out the Kubernetes load balancing. In this version of the site, I haven't added this feature yet. The one I showed earlier was sort of the end result through the magic of video editing. So if we click down here into that debug message, we're dumping out all the headers, and you can see that we don't have any geolocation headers here yet. We only have the user's IP address, which I've blurred out here. I've also thrown in some other debug information in here, like the host name and the binary that's running the site. All right, so let's look at how we add these headers here into this site here. In the next tab, I have the sysadmindemo.com website's load balancer configuration open. You can see we're accepting a few different types of traffic here. Just HTTP, along with HTTPS, and I've added a custom SSL certificate. And there's no user-defined headers right now. So let's go back to the documentation page and we'll scroll down a bit. And you can see some example commands here where we can add the user defined headers. So I'm just going to copy this second example here over into a text editor. And I've already marked it all up using the values from the table above. So let me show you that. So this is the command that I put together that we're going to run and modify the load balancer for sysadmindemo.com. This will inject a whole bunch of custom headers on each request. So this will give us the estimated round trip time, the country, the state or province, the city, and the city's lat long. Then we'll grab a whole bunch of TLS metadata too. Finally, we're going to create a custom header here that has a few values in a single line. Chances are you're not going to add all these like I have here, but you'd probably select a few and then just combine them into one header. And then you could parse these using some scripts on your web server. But it's totally up to you how you want to configure this. So let's jump back to the console and actually run this. So I'm going to use this Cloud Shell for this. I already have one open. So you can use this command here to get a listing of all the load balancers in your project, but I already know the one I want. So let me just paste that custom command from our editor now. So you can see I'm requesting these headers be updated for this specific load balancer here by saying gcloud beta compute backend update and then the load balancer ID. Then let's run it. And that's it. So let's jump over to the sysadmindemo.com debug page and refresh it a few times. This typically takes about 5 to 10 minutes to fully deploy. So what I'm going to do is pause the recording and then I'll come back in a few minutes when it's updated. All right, so we're back and the values are here. Let me just increase the size so you can see what's going on. So you can see we have all our geolocation headers now. Pretty cool, right? And these are passed through from the load balancer. So we have the city, the state, the country, the round trip time, etc. So now on the web server side, we could parse these out and hopefully increase the value of the user's experience. Maybe by pre-selecting the default language, maybe assisting with some sort of lookup, or in my case, building a leaderboard where we can group user requests by country. Then on the currently deployed version of the site, you can see down in the footer here, it hasn't been updated yet. But when you go to sysadmindemo.com, you should see in the footer your city listed here. And so what I'm doing is in the backend web server code, I'm parsing out the request header for your city and I'm printing it here. And that's it. So how can you do this without using Google? Well, traditionally you'd use something like MaxMind. Honestly, this product probably goes back 15 plus years. I remember using it a long time ago for simple fraud detection. And there's a whole slew of integrations you can use too. So what you'd typically do is you'd have this software installed on your web server, and as a request comes in, you're looking up that IP address. Or what happens a lot is you'll do this in post-processing where you'll log the IP address and then you'll sort of enrich that data by hitting the MaxMind software. But the cool thing about the Google Cloud Load Balancer option is that it's already pre-processed for you, so you can just take advantage of it right when the request is coming in. The MaxMind software, I'd say, is pretty much the industry standard. It also costs a few bucks, but it's sort of all relative to how much traffic you're getting. And here's the pricing page. So you can see it costs a couple bucks. I think the Google version is 75 cents per million requests. So it's pretty reasonable for small sites, but I imagine if you had a huge amount of traffic, you'd probably be looking at something else. In the episode notes below, I've also included a link to a Cloudflare post. While doing research for this episode, I found out that they do something similar where they will inject geolocation headers based on user requests. So if you're using them, that might be something to check out. I think it's free too. All right, that's it for this episode. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next week.